then today is Monday, November 20th, 2023, and we are here with Anna Trorisch, small as a Mindflow, Joanna Atje, and Sent. Nobody knows who Sent is. He's here since years, but still nobody knows who he is. But he's awesome, that's for sure. And we are coming together. So first workshop on the final proposal of DeepFunding token requirements. And the first workshop where we ideally look a little bit on technical requirements and feasibilities on general tokens, native assets on Cardano blockchain, and ideally look already in which CIPs, Cardano improvement proposals, we might or would have to look in order to design a token for project DeepFunding. And with that, Joanna, do you want to add something? Or Anna Rarish or Sent?
Yeah, maybe I can give Sent just a really quick background on like what the idea is, or how DeepFunding calculates their voting weight. So DeepFunding, unlike Catalyst, they incorporate community contribution into the final voting weight. So just like Idea Scale, they have a portal called Sway. Eventually that might become their own in-house portal, but for every proposal that's being proposed, community members can interact with the proposal. So they can like, comment, vote, and all sorts of stuff. And that's translated into a contribution score or an engagement score. And then that's combined with the square root of their holdings to give their final voting weight. As of now, all those scores are off-chain. So we want to ideate around how do we represent this engagement score on-chain? What makes the most sense as a token, as a dynamic NFT, as a DID? We just want to kind of brainstorm together and see what makes sense. Ideally, this token would also be helpful for the entire SNet ecosystem and not just for DeepFunding.
Yeah, thank you.
And
so
maybe,
is this going in? I'm sorry that I haven't read up on this proposal, but is this meant to be something for the whole community of
Yes.
Of this blockchain?
Yeah.
And also just to clarify, like SingularityNet, it's not their own blockchain. They are more like a platform using different blockchains in this regard, Ethereum and Cardano. And we really focus on the Cardano side of things.
Great.
So from your experience, Sent, do you know any similar applications on Cardano? Or similar tokens or anything of that sort?
That has to do with not at this time, at least for me. But it's no technical issues of creating such tokens, of course. And since the last months now, we have had some developments into different CIPs for how tokens are created on Cardano. So I think that we should definitely look into how these latest CIPs are, so that we create it accordingly and support those.
Do you by any chance have reference to the CIPs? If not at the top of your head, maybe after the call.
Yeah, I can provide the links, but it's one created by Barry, Alice, which is the CIP 68, and another one written down by Adam Dean, which is CIP 88.
Awesome, thank you.
And we have CIP 30 as well, which might be relevant at this right.
Yeah, which is the wallet connector. Yeah.
So we have CIP 68, 88, and 30.
Hi,
Hey,
Jingles.
Jingles.
Hey, hi everyone.
Hi, Jingles.
Hi.
Hello.
Just started already a little bit. A quick recap on the whole thing. Like main purpose of this workshop is to look a little bit on technical feasibilities and standards and new, especially new emerging stuff on the CIP side on Cardano's to mint contributors token for project DeepFunding, and already see if it's actually really tokens we need, or do you rather might even go into some other direction of, for example, DID or SSI or something like this. And right now, simply looking on, Send introduced some latest changes or the updates on CIPs, mostly on CIP 68 and 88. And additionally, we would have CIP 30 as well on the list there to simply look, okay, from the tech side of things, where do we have to keep an eye on? Because Jingles has with Mesh some quite cool, this with Treasury Guild, we use Mesh.js code to mint tokens.
And do you
So-
mint them, like, this might be a very stupid question, but like the contribution score keeps getting updated. Do you burn the old ones and mint new ones? Is it like one token per like one-on-one, or is it like a token representing the final score? Like how do you guys do it right now with with Mesh.js?
Yeah, so with Mesh is we are not really doing it. More like with Damio, that's the project name. Mesh is the toolkit. There's lots of ways to think about contribution. The way that we are thinking about may or may not suits the way the business of yours want to look at it. So how we are working on is a single number, that kind of idea. Of course, every updates are trackable. So you can think from a developer point of view. For example, we are building a project, or you are a writer, you want to contribute to Cointelegraph, that kind of thing. So for every articles that you push or every code changes that you push, some kind of blockchain transaction can take place. And then the verifier, who is maybe Cointelegraph themselves or the project themselves, can verify that says, oh, you did the work. So by doing that, it confirms, and that reputation gets updated after the confirmation. There are probably many ways to determine what is a reputation. For now, we are just looking at one number, say, oh, one contribution, two contribution, that kind of thing. Of course, things are expandable. If you want it to be more like a piece of NFT being generated at each time, that's totally possible as well. So I think having more complexity means also every transaction can cost more. Our reputation update is probably like about 188-ish, like 1.2 for each confirmation. If you want to include NFTs, then there will be like locking minimum ADA to lock into each NFTs as well. That will just bump up the value quite a fair bit. And also for contribution or reputation, it's important to note that this way of doing is not very common in the Web2 world. Web2 world, because everything is stored in database, is free, right? You can like every likes, you just +1 +1. For here, you want to think about the bigger ticket items. So that's why we say, okay, a big piece of code being published or contributed, or a piece of workshop that is like 1-2 hours, something that worth the amount of effort in terms like the cost of transaction, then the reputation is being pumped up. So it should not be a small items like, oh, I like your thing, and then I up the reputation. That would be very costly.
Okay, that makes sense. And so then the final reputation, is it minted as a token? Like, how do you guys represent that on chain?
So it's on chain is just a metadata, just something that we can pull, and then, oh, okay, this records, and it's not one number, it can be many numbers. You can be like, oh, intelligence, strength, and agility, that kind of thing is basically like a table. But of course, you cannot think like a gigantic set of information. There's a small set of information that we can keep track of. So things like that we can keep track. Just think of strings. Yeah.
Okay. May I just kind of explain how I understood it, like how to represent it, and tell me if I kind of on the right track. So like, is it that every member of the, I'm going to call them a community member, has like a reputation on chain, and it's their metadata that keeps getting updated?
That's right.
And so that representation, is it a token?
Fundamentally, yes, it is. Every user has like up to 2 tokens. One is in the wallet, one is the smart contract, and the one in the smart contract will hold the data.
Okay.
So the token only happen at the beginning, like you join the platform. You are the writer, you want to write for Telegraph, you sign up an account. That is when the account or the token is being created. You want to contribute to Mesh.js, that's when the token is being minted to you. Say, okay, now you can contribute, you know. So that is only one time. The minting only happen once. Then the updating is the transactions that happens after.
Okay, interesting.
And also important here to mention as well, a reputation, like a reputation on chain is not such as, okay, this is the file where you have, let's say, this is reputation. Reputation, after all, are only sets of soft parameters, which you define to say, what do you want to call a reputation actually in this regard?
Yeah.
And each project, each community, each ecosystem defines its own parameters, how they want to define actually reputation. The basic data to define a reputation is usually contribution or engagement, which you're able to recognize on-chain in this regard. And then you use the on-chain files to say, oh, okay, let's say, for example, disregard transactions. And in terms of transactions, the metadata is the most important one, because you don't really send value, let's say, in this regard, and for example, in this regard. But what you add in the transaction metadata becomes really the, let's say, a little bit the goal of it. And then you can define what do you want to generate for reputation out of this.
Right.
Yeah. So here you can see that there is like 0001100. So why is 1 is because the teacher, so this context is like a learning management, you think like Coursera or Udemy. You submit an assignment, you will still be 0 until the teacher or the course or organizer says, okay, your assignment looks good. Then the second transaction will take place, and then you update 1 over here. And all these are not stored on a database. Who are these people? Are not stored on the database. They are all on-chain data. These 0 and 1s are all on-chain data. So this is what's being stored in the smart contract token. Then here, this second value is the most recent module, right? So because he completed 1, we know that we also stored 100. 100 is just a cost module. It can be 100, 100, 200, 300, and all this. So this is how it probably looks like. You can think like these are just strings, things you want to store. Yeah.
Nice.
Can I say a few general thoughts about the project first? Like you said that obviously this is the ideation phase. So like Felix was saying, we need to establish what are the requirements, specifications of the token. And that's one of the main questions. And I think the second main question would be, do we, during this ideation phase, do we need to determine who is going to be responsible for developing this token distribution and integration solution? Because ultimately, when it comes down to implementing the actual project that will result from this ideation phase, that is going to be one of the main pillars of it, right? Is that something that we need to determine during this phase, or is that something to be determined in the actual project? I think, Joanna, you can.
Yeah, I think the output of this would be like a request for proposal that anyone can like propose to actually implement. Am I right, Felix?
That's depending, right? I mean, right now, the outcome of this whole ideation DeepFunding token requirements is to say, ideally, by the end, we come up with a recommendation on some very basic, let's say, okay, already technical feasibility, how could all the thing. And this recommendation could serve to initiate then further steps. Also in this regard, like we submitted a proposal in the ideation phase and the idea in the ideation pool. And the main idea in DeepFunding ideation pool was to say, you have a nice idea. You don't have the full framework or architecture yet. It's still a very early idea. Go in ideation so that the ideation proposal from this round translates into actual real proposal of developing and deploying the thing in a later round. So it should be part actually of this ideation phase to say who, like maybe options, who could actually run the minting process of the whole thing and the maintenance and everything on this, and more outlining like, what is if Singularity Net Foundation itself would do it? How could it be an alternative as well that community could do it for example? And then showing a little bit what are the feasibilities already, listing out the options and say, what do we actually want to go for then in a later step?
I think, yeah, that will work. To clarify also, like make very clear, just right from a business of how users will use it. What are the different roles of people who will be using it, and how their journey of interacting with the system will look like. That will really be very helpful at the start. Then the second step will be from the technology side to understand this user flow, to see what are the gaps, who is doing what, that kind of thing. So I will screen share again to show you this whole thing. Share the entire screen. You can see that, for example, just now I talked about the second, I mentioned about a few roles, right? So there will be like the learners, and then there's the facilitators. Apparently there's one, I'm a facilitator. So I can look at this. So I'm showing you because this is how the user flow, some expectation of what is expected from the product. If I were to connect a wallet, it realizes that I'm the facilitator. I'm able to see. So this person has submitted 100, module 100, and I can accept 100 and sign the transaction. So this is the user flow as a facilitator. So it's up to you what it means to update reputation, who are the roles, then we can create these stories into something like that, something of technological product roadmap kind of thing. Yeah.
Because how Damir goes about, for example, in this regard, there are three main roles. The first one is the, let's say, course creator. Course creator is the person who can actually put content on the on-chain part, actually. Only the course creators. Then the learners can come and engage with the courses, for example, in this regard, which are like also has an on-chain file. And on Damio, everything is actually from the CMS part, so content management system. Everything is stored in Markdown files in a sort of headless library, actually, a little bit in this regard. And when learners come and submit, for example, stuff, then the facilitators are there to look actually on saying, oh, okay, is this a right contribution or a bad contribution? Each of the roles have their own tokens.
Yeah.
And the tokens give you directly specific permissions as well. With a learner, I can just do X set of actions on the platform itself, for example. As a facilitator, I can do other actions. And as a course creator, I can do other actions as well. So the role itself is represented to the specific token as well in this regard.
Yeah. So hopefully this demo will make it very clear so far. To me, it's super clear. Like I just show you that I have accepted this guy's assignment. Previously it was 0 once over here, and he has finished 100. Everything is on chain, no database. So if this is something, this is a reputation, right? You know that this guy has finished one. And to you, you may not be interested in assignments, obviously. You can be like some other scores, like some other reputation score, and you want to collect more information about some other things. It doesn't have to be 2 items. It can be like 10 over items to keep track.
And Jingles, other than like the user, this information is just on chain. The user doesn't
Yeah,
have
sure.
anything.
User does not.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, user do not have what?
Like, do they, like we said, the user can have up to 2 tokens. This is represented in a token that they can hold within their wallet, or
That's
is it that? And okay.
Yeah, they are holding this particular token, and exactly the same token is also on chain. There's 2 pieces of token.
And they update simultaneously?
This is like, imagine your key, a hotel key card that you own to enter your room. The one that's on chain is holding on to all this data.
Which is the metadata
Yeah, that's right.
that you can update.
That's right.
Okay, that seems very like relevant for how
Yeah,
DeepFunding.
and also the fun thing is also he don't update however he likes. Realize that only the facilitator, for example, updated a proof that he has finished assignment 1.
Yeah.
So something like that can happen.
Right. Okay.
Then also one more information here. You can see this is just a demo. Everything is just empty. You can update because it's empty right now. So this particular column is a demo for the user themselves can update this information, some public information they want to expose to everyone. It can be anything. These are all on chain. This is also something that's on chain.
And the idea behind the learner having a token in their wallet is just so they can.
Passport.
Okay, yeah. But there's no utility, like there's nothing behind it.
It's an account. So think like that. You log in with Facebook or something like that. So when you log in with wallet, and I know, oh, you are this guy and not this guy. When you submit assignment, you are submitting as this guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for example, when you create your token, you give yourself a name actually in this regard.
Yeah.
So you can name yourself however you want. And what is really important, what Shingles mentioned, is like, this are actually the 2 parts here. On one part, we have the more identity side of thing, which is actually the left row here. So where you know, oh, okay, this is, like Shingles mentioned, the card to your hotel room a little bit, which recognizes, oh, okay, that's really you. And everything on the left side then. And this is all fed into your ID actually. So whatever you contribute, whatever you do on the platform, for example, in this regard, it's referred to your profile. So for example, I can go on the profile and see, okay, this have been the completed assignments from myself, for example, in this regard.
From the on-chain. And sorry, is it just tied to the one wallet they created with, or can they send it to another wallet?
Yeah, they can. It's just a token.
Okay, yeah, it's not okay.
But
That's
of
very
course, that can be part of the metadata, of course, of the token. So that if you transfer it to somebody else, then it will still be the original person's property. So I don't think that we should make it possible for people to transfer their knowledge to somebody else.
Yeah.
That would be unwise. But of course, as Jingle says, somebody can, of course, send it to somebody else, but it should be put in measures so that it can't be used by somebody else.
Yeah. So these are all business logic that just now mentioning, like the user story, like what can user do, how do they do it, what cannot they do, you know, these are all part of the user story and business objective.
Yeah.
Then from these requirements and the stories, then we can translate to something like what you see right here, what to show, what kind of buttons they can click to do what. For example, here is just submitting assignment, approving assignments, right?
Do we need a token, a separate token, simply for the identification? We can make that the ID system wallet based, So we don't need necessarily an NFT for, because what you're describing is basically minting a CIP 68 NFT and then storing in the reference token the information reputation and using
That's
the
right.
others for the identification, right? And
Yes,
that
right.
can be transferred. But for the identification, we don't necessarily need an NFT that can be transferred. We could simply tie it to the wallet address, right? And create the reputation system based around the actual contributions of each individual who is tied to a wallet, and represent that, instead of updating the metadata of the NFT, represent that through a fungible token, which would be distributed once per round. Because the thing here is that as separate, or that's different from the project that you're presenting, is that we already have there's already a system in place, right, Joanna, that tracks the different parameters and the different contributions of each individual. So when you, for instance, comment, and that's already being taken into account by the system already, it's simply that it's done in an off-chain variant. And the idea here is to represent that with an on-chain option instead. So probably a fungible token representing those values that you can accrue over time would probably make more sense in this case than simply updating one or multiple values, but still values inside of a token. But those fungible tokens would be a lot more flexible, right? Because you could, for instance, at certain times redeem them for NFTs representing your contributions, or different other mechanics could be baked into the system as time goes on. Whereas if we tie ourselves from the beginning into one non-fungible token, which is supposed to represent your whole journey through the system, then we don't have other options. And another thing that is different here is that we don't have set rows. Bye, Sent. See you. Talk soon. We don't have set rows, right? So in the example that you described, there was a learner and there was a predefined learner and a predefined educator. Here, things are a lot more flexible, right? I can also be a contributor, like commenting on one proposal, but maybe I'm also a proposal, and maybe the system wants to recognize both. And I also offer reviews, and I also make other contributions to the ecosystem, especially as Felix was mentioning in the beginning. Maybe in time this would be used by the wider Singularity ecosystem, not just for deep funding. So I think using a fungible token here would be more appropriate, but we can still tie it to some sort of an identity token, or maybe represent the identity just through the wallet. That's a bit more, it's not as flexible, right? Because if you have the identity token, maybe you can move that in between your wallets, but still, then you would still be able to transfer it maybe to someone else. I'm not sure that that's a problem, because if I...
Actually, Ramesh, on this, sometimes it's a problem, because we had this, for example, with Swarmwood. We are also doing the ambassadors program, where we take exactly this approach. We actually take the wallet as identifier of the contributor, but then people change their wallet over time. And then it becomes quite a hurdle to update the wallet. While when it would be a token, then it wouldn't be that necessary what wallet they hold or use in this regard, as they could simply say, oh, okay, because in this regard, they update their wallet themselves. They simply transfer the token from the old one to the new one.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying, that with an identity token, you get that transferability. And the problem that Sent was mentioning is that you could transfer it to someone else. And I was saying that I don't think that that's a problem, that transfer. Because, for instance, if I'm active in the ecosystem, right, and I accumulate this voting weight, right? Because it ultimately, at least in the DF ecosystem, it comes down to voting weight. That's what it affects, right? In addition to AGIX. So I accumulate that reputation, that voting weight, and maybe after a couple of years, I'm not interested in participating in the system. But I still have skin in the game that I have accumulated over time. And I should be able to transfer that reputation that I accumulated maybe to someone else. Maybe I have a whatever close friend. Maybe I want to sell them, but let's not go down that road. But let's say I want to transfer it to someone else who I trust with voting, right? Who I want to delegate this voting weight to, and this would also facilitate that if it's a fungible token instead of a.
So what there could be a tricky thing in this, because right now the contribution score is added to the voting weight, which means ideally in this regard, it's like DeepFunding goes about this thing of, well, plutocratic is shit. How can we build a more equal voting mechanism? So it means we have already the quadratic voting coupled to the contribution score in this regard. And now we have, for example, a problem in this regard, because the contribution score adds additional weight to your vote. And let's say, for example, your wallet, you don't have any contributions and your wallet is not that old. You have less power than somebody who actually maybe contributes since a long time really strongly. What happens now if you have some kind of coalitions between individuals where individuals says, I don't have a lot of ADA, but I have a lot of reputation and you are my whale friend. So I sent you the token. And now you accumulated both my reputation with your assets.
This is politics. I mean, it's just human politics. You cannot design a system that prevents humans from being humans, right? I don't think that should be the because things to circumvent any design will be found, right? It's ultimately it's about voting. So I don't necessarily agree with your assumption there that plutocratic is shit, because that's not proven. But anyway, let's. I understand that you want to augment the simply plutocratic and voting, and this will do that because the only way to earn these tokens initially would be to participate through the ecosystem. So it augments that. It's not like you could just walk in and buy your voting weight like you can with AGIX.
Like an implementation that you guys are doing now that I think works very well. But there's just one thing that's different is like the contribution score right now is like because it's a representation of your voice, it's like a number that can get larger. But right now it's only, with how I understood your reputation, it's like one token, and then you can see all the different contributions in the metadata. So how can we represent that differently? Because right now it's like the contribution score could be like 0 to, let's say, 500, for example.
Actually, depending on which data you are able to streamline into the process. Actually, in this regard, you have to think about between the reputation and engagement, there's a whole process, right? Where you actually say which data is used in this regard and being translated to an on-chain readable, let's say, formatted in this way. And what would need to happen there is to say, for example, right now on Sway is the problem that we can get very little access to actual data, right? There aren't any APIs, the only thing what we can get is some CSV files, which is kind of very shitty, right? But therefore, DeepFunding builds up their own platform. And I think that's another whole topic then actually also on the technical feasibility to say which data sets can be streamed into the whole recognition part. And actually, let's say you attend a town hall, or you join a workshop, or you engage heavily in Discord, or something like this, for example, right?
Well,
to say
that we're building ideally is to allow that to happen. So how I'm thinking about it is like, imagine if there's a knowledge graph that's representing the database, for example, that has all sorts of data inputs in it. And then the platform allows the end user to configure a reputation score that works for their use case. So they can add like weights to certain variables, they can discard some data, add some data, and then eventually that contribution score would be what would be used in the voting weight. So let's say for this round, we want to like add all the participation in Discord, give it an extra weight, add like their wallet history, all these different data points, which is really nice because this could be represented as the metadata. And then the final score, which is what was configured, would be represented as the token. That's the one thing that I'm not like, the token itself, is it just capturing that information, or is it also going to represent the weight of the reputation? Does that make sense? I'm just speaking out loud, but I'm trying to understand.
Ideally, it would put more do both, right? In this regard, that you can look on that. Let's say, for example, I don't know anything about the contributor, but I have the idea of the hash of its token. So can on the token log on the metadata and can see, person engaged here. And this is the metadata which you actually pull into the reputation system, right? For example, right now for the contribution system, they're just numbers, right? Actually, in this regard, it's just on a spreadsheet right now. In this regard, and a lot of the stuff is done manually, right? So in this regard, and simply to say, okay, the token itself and its metadata updates itself through the engagement of the contributor itself. And you use this metadata to then simply translate it into a reputation. And that's our own process as well, right?
I got you. I was thinking I flipped them. I implemented the metadata after the contribution score was calculated, but we're saying to represent all of those data points on chain and then use that on chain metadata to then calculate the final contribution score.
Exactly.
So that way, every user, that makes a lot of sense, because then that way every user will always have a representation of their contribution as on chain as a token and its metadata, and then that's what's actually being used to configure the score that's relevant for just this DeepFunding round or whatever, what have you.
Exactly.
Okay.
So ideally, in this regard, there's also the idea of using DLT technology actually in this regard. It's an immutable, publicly accessible base action database in this regard. And this is the file with which you want to work when you define your reputation, not with your APIs from Discord, for example, or something like this. APIs from Discord get fed, for example, into Streamer, and now you put it transform it first into the metadata of the contributor token. Right. They come on chain, and now you do use this stuff for your reputation, actually. So your reputation only consumes information from the blockchain.
Exactly. Okay, that makes sense. And then that way there's more parallels with what Andamio is building.
Yes, because also in this regard, then you are able to design your smart contracts actually in this regard, right? Yeah. There's another whole pattern as well, which then interact with the on-chain data to pull back additional, let's say, functionalities or utilities to your token. Right?
Yeah.
So I want to highlight also the token idea, which to me works very well. It's also part of my paper kind of thinking for voting in the future. And why so? Because the way Catalyst works, right, is kind of don't make sense to me in one way. One person who has a lot of ADA can just vote, and using the same amount in the future, he can get more and more and accumulate more just to vote more and more powerful, right? Instead, the other way of thinking, which is something that I'm planning to work on, is like this airline mile kind of concept, which is your fungible token, and voting consume the token. And doing that now, let's say fund DeepFunding round 4, for example, you spend 50,000. It will literally 50,000 get burned away from your account, meaning you are so bullish about this particular project in fund 4, you're gonna spend it away to vote it. So it will consume your fund 5, right? Your ability to vote. So a combine of a token with also some kind of on-chain identity / reputation can possibly work, because my 50,000 points can worth 100,000 because of my reputation. Where someone who has just been farming the token there are 50,000 is just 50,000. But the point is it gets burned. And doing that is kind of healthy in my imagination, because someone will not have they can't just vote blindly. They have to they feel the pain of voting this. It's something of a limited quantity.
Okay.
So I like that. To me, that is airline mouse. Like now, if I want to use my airline mouse to upgrade to business class, it doesn't mean that my account has 20,000 and I can upgrade to business for every ride. So if I choose to fly from Singapore to New York, I want to upgrade to business class, it will consume my mouse. So this is how I'm thinking for voting.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the flexibilities that combining it with the fungible tokens give you. And like I was saying, it also opens up possibilities for using it in other areas of the ecosystem besides deep funding, right? Because if you have just the deep funding reputation, that's just limited to deep funding, then you don't have the flexibility to use it or to accrue more. Maybe you're active in other parts of the ecosystem outside of deep funding, and that gives you more more voting power inside of deep funding. And yeah, Jingo's idea is also a good one to introduce what Felix was calling like conviction voting, right? So burning the tokens, and that's actually something that you can do. When you vote, you can create a voting transaction, and that voting transaction automatically costs you or deducts from your wallet a certain amount of tokens, and those tokens are either whatever stored by the treasury or burnt, or probably burnt. We can have an open policy and just burn the tokens at the end of the round after they're collected from everyone with one single transaction. So it doesn't cost too much to burn, because this is another good point that Jingos was making in the beginning. We need to be mindful of the fact that we cannot just update like the reputations every time there's an action, right? We can only do it probably once per fund, so that it makes economic sense. It makes and still it will be a cost that the deep funding, the Singularity Foundation or someone else will have to bear, but it won't be such a large cost, right? It will be probably the same, given that they're already distributing AGIX as rewards, right? They're already distributing AGIX, and they can distribute the reputation token along with the AGIX, because the minimal ADA required is the same. If you're distributing 1 or 2 tokens, it doesn't matter. But it increases a bit by very little.
So
and you can also even facilitate if you set up bulk transactions. Right now, let's try to avoid as many transactions as possible and just put them into bulk transactions. This is how we do it with Swarm Treasury system as well. So we try to put as much transaction as possible. This is a little bit shitty on Cardano's side, that I think there's a maximum like on 60 megabytes, something on this, what you can put into one single transaction. So you have to chunk it down into consumable sizes. But yeah, this is an important point actually, because if you also what Shingles mentioned on the beginning, if you want to recognize too many tiny engagements, it doesn't work. If you have to send the transaction fee for each shitty, I wrote a Discord message. Yeah, 1.5 to recognize it, and that doesn't go further thing. So there might be also some need also in maybe developing some algorithms which can chunk down data and which you can use actually in the end to, let's say, to encode and decode the stuff, so that you, in the metadata itself, it's actually a compressed data through algorithm, and then you can use the algorithm to decompress the stuff at the end as well, which could actually be insanely cool if you want really to increase the amount of information what you put in a single transaction this regard.
Yeah. For microtransactions, there are two ways. The first one is using database. It's very common in things like DeFi. It's quick and easy. Just records all the all the actions, the kind of rewards, and then the user can redeem them anytime. So that will be super easy. Another way that I'm working on is Hydra, enabling it for some long-term hosted version. So getting the IOG and Emergo to be the first set of L2 SPOs kind of thing. I'm not too sure when that can happen. Hopefully next year Q2 earliest. Then with that, people can hop onto this wagon. And of course, more things need to be in place before things can be production. We need some kind of L1, L2 marketplace. We need wallets to be able to talk to L2s. So all these things, Cardano is pretty lag behind compared to Bitcoin and other chains. So having Hydra, this kind of L2s, then our microtransaction will be able to have a lot of fun.
Well, the thing is here that we already there's already a system in place, right, for capturing each interactions. How does
the system right now is really minimalistic. It's really only covered on proposal engagements in this regard. Let's say you submit a proposal, you comment on your proposal, and you receive thumbs up or thumbs down on the comments on your proposal, plus the age of your wallet. And it's insanely basic right now. And ideally, we move out of this and much more diverse, actually.
Yeah, but it's basic, but it's already in place. I mean, you can add to it.
Yeah.
Or
Yes.
are you thinking that it will be completely replaced if Singularity Foundation decides to? So it's basic now, but you can add to it, and
I think this would be like another piece that will be put in. So just like, sorry, go ahead.
I guess until, like Jingles was saying, Hydra comes along, that maybe we will be able to record micro engagements on chain or whatever. But until then, there is this off-chain solution, this database that records interactions, and it can be diversified and complexified to record more interactions, more of what we need, and then create a bridge, because that's what we need. And this is something that we need to take into account and present to whoever will be developing the solution, right? There needs to be a bridge created between the database, right, the off-chain data, and transform that once each round to the on-chain data through transactions and updating identity tokens possibly, and distributing fungible tokens in accordance with the off-chain data.
Ideally, this would be though like a standalone, because right now, like let's say the existing solution is just capturing data from the Sway and the voting portal that's specific to DeepFunding. Ideally, the next step would be to have data being captured from all different pipelines. Like, for example, to the solution called Together Crew, they capture participation on social media networks, for example. And then ideally, like all of these data points would be fed into this on-chain representation, not just from one solution, because otherwise we're just replicating. I mean, yes, it's on-chain, so it's different, but we're just replicating databases just to use the data that's already existing within this platform to calculate the score. Do you know what I mean?
And where I think both come nicely together, as well as to say, a whole reputation system, this usually takes months and months and years to develop, right? So in this regard, I think first step could be to say already, what is already there, where we don't have to add more, and simply already what Raresh just mentioned, build a bridge already, how to translate this properly into on-chain format. And once we have this bridge, then we can say, oh, okay, now we have off-chain data here, on-chain data here, And now we can ramp up and level up the off-chain data by having already the process figured out how to bridge it properly, actually, in this regard. Because if we would first define what all beautiful things do we want to capture and don't even know how the bridge exactly looks like, we might run into a difficult process by maybe looking on first, okay, how to take a minimal set of data, which is already there, and it's valuable already in this regard, translate it. And then once we have the translation, then we can translate into a shitload of different engagements. Right?
And so the token, this identity token, from a user perspective, like a DeepFunding community member, is it that like every community member will therefore be minted a token that represents all of their on-chain? Okay, so that's really nice. That makes sense.
And the beautiful thing there is like, what I really like with Andamio as well is they are not sent by Andamio, or you mint them yourself, right? Which leads a little bit into pitfall that you can mint as many as you want in this regard. So people will definitely do this, right? They just can set up 10 different wallets and use 10 different tokens. But the problem now is they will not be able to maintain all the stuff when you look on it from months and years perspective, right? So this I think Sybil with this assistance in this regard is really defined by long-term use case, actually.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. That's where the fungible tokens comes in, because you can mint as many identity tokens, but you cannot spend the time to accrue, right? Time is limited.
Yes.
Exactly. It's not for a benefit.
Yeah. So, and I think it's important to emphasize that if we translate the on-chain data, the off-chain data to on-chain data, we're not just simply moving the database on-chain, because having it represented on-chain opens up a lot of different possibilities that you wouldn't be able to accomplish the same things just simply using the database, especially a database that's centralized in a third-party entity like Sway, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
it would be important to, exactly, what kind of data is it that we actually want to represent?
Yeah, and like Felix was saying, after we have this minimal data that we're perhaps already capturing, maybe we can add a few more data points to it and represent those on-chain. In the future, a lot of other different things from other parts of the ecosystem or other parts of DeepFunding can be added.
Of course.
Yeah.
Then also we are coming to the end of the call already. Some key learnings from today, which I think came up a little bit, is we definitely go with fungible tokens, not with NFTs in this regard. It makes much more sense. I think, and this is something you briefly mentioned before, Rarish, I think we should definitely look on them as open policy tokens in this regard, as we might want to adjust to them. So
yeah,
this
definitely.
might be.
You cannot mint an upfront amount. Yeah.
Well, you can, but then you simply mint them all. Let's say 10,000. You assume you have 10,000 learners, and then you just
but the assumptions will not turn out to be correct. That's a different.
Yes. And on this regard then as well, that we go actually with a system where we have a by demand token minting in this regard. So nothing is pre-minted, only the contributors mint them by demand, by engagement themselves, actually. The tokens themselves are not minted by an entity. Only the minting process in this regard is offered, let's say, by DeepFunding community ecosystem in this regard, though the minting of the tokens happens by the contributor only in this regard.
Yeah. An important point to mention here that if you make the minting on demand, then we don't need to worry about the transaction costs either. Because if, for instance, a contributor wants to mint tokens for microtransactions, whatever he accumulated in a day, he can pay for the minting fees if he wants to.
Yeah, it's like
this actually brings a tricky thing then, right? Because this means actually in this regard, because you are right? The transaction fees are covered by the contributor itself. What is actually quite nice in this regard, but as more I contribute, as more costly it comes for me as well. No, so there's
No.
The one-time fee to create the identity token for yourself.
No, not the identity token, but the fungible tokens. It depends on the frequency of you requesting the tokens to be minted on chain. So if you want them every day, then yeah, sure, it's going to cost more. But if you want them just at the end of the fund, no matter how much you contributed, it's still going to cost just one transaction, right? So you don't have to, it only costs more if you're ODD and you want your tokens every day, and you want to see them in your wallet. Otherwise, it doesn't cost more, regardless of how much you contribute. And you can even make them two ways, right? So one, the contributor mints them themselves if they so want to, and then at the end of the fund, DeepFunding distributes all the tokens to anyone, regardless of if they minted it themselves or not. So
I think I took it from the example how Andamio is going about it, because each time I finish a lesson, let's say, for example, and I submit my content, let's say, I have to submit my content via a transaction, actually in my wallet.
Yeah, but that's because that they don't have any kind of database. Everything for them is on chain.
Okay.
In this case, you wouldn't need an off-chain database, right, to record things. I mean, you could go, but then we face the same problem of an endless number of transactions and costs that spiral out of control. So you need some sort of off-chain representation, and the only way that the costs increase is determined by the frequency of you requesting your on-chain representation, your tokens, right? So it doesn't matter how much you contribute. If it matters how many times you want to see that contribution, how frequently do you want to see that contribution on-chain? And that's up to you. That's not, right? It doesn't cost more if you only withdraw them once a fund. It should be the same for everyone, regardless of how much they contribute. If everyone only requests once a fund. But yeah, you are making a good summary of the call, and I don't want to sidetrack the conversation too much.
No, but this was pretty much it already on this. This would be the main things. And one suggestion from Jingles, I really like what you mentioned before, maybe creating a sort of a user journey in this regard, also to the specific roles, to say, as a contributor, how does it exactly look like a step-by-step or end-to-end process in this regard, as well to define what other roles do we have. We have contributors and we have verifiers, actually, in this regard, because you need some sort of instance who is able to verify that the contribution actually happened.
Well,
Can be a smart contract as well in a later stage, but needs to be really well done and everything in this regard. But to
what about the actual data providers? Like, can those be, since they're the ones that are, like, can it be verified at that level? Since they're the ones that are going to provide the data that represents what's being contributed? The verifier, do you know what I mean?
That's the thing, right? That you actually say, for example, when you look on Sway, for example, to say right now, for example, you have community members who engage, they submit proposals, they submit comments, they give thumbs up, thumbs down. Then there's a second role, who actually takes this data and does something with the stuff now, right? This is in the regard the verifier, actually, as well. Like, for example, the DeepFunding focus group goes through and says, okay, this have been bot generated comments, for example, we filter them out or something like this. So you always, and that's usually on blockchain always the part, right? You have the submitter and you have the verifier.
Yeah.
A little bit. And in this regard, these roles are reflected through the token itself, right? That you could say, for example, I log into the DeepFunding portal as a verifier. I can engage on a different way with the info, with the content on the portal than a contributor can. For example, I see different pages than the contributor does, right? I can approve or deny contributions, for example, in this regard. And this utility is linked to my token itself.
Right.
Which also says, for example, in this regard, that you can build a really nice streamline there as well, where you can say, what is the larger journey of a contributor from a contributor to a verifier? Because ideally, we want to have this community empowerment and education in place, right? That we say, hey, if you want to do more, you don't have to stay your whole life a contributor. Because on DeepFunding, we want to have the community actually operating the administrations of DeepFunding Round. So also show, and then you can define parameters like how many and to which kind of contributions enable that you become a verifier automatically.
Right.
And then it's not a single person who appoints you and says, hey, we really like your contributions. Welcome in the blah, blah, blah cohort.
Or like expert or whatever, like different roles that make sense within the ecosystem.
Exactly. So that people can decide themselves, and the system which is able to recognize contributions and can say, hey, you leveled up, congratulations. But it's not one person who champions some people and says, hey, you are now admins. Like,
that's very helpful, because then you can port that over to other ecosystems and projects. And, you know, for Cardano, for example, if that existed with DREPs and like all sorts of stuff.
One observation before we close. So you had a good point about the user journey and the user stories, but I don't know if that's necessarily part of this project, right? Because I think that's actually would be more work into properly defining the user stories than the whole scope of this project. So I think we need to, in this project, to focus on the broader requirements for a more high level, not completely high level, but I guess a bit more high level than the user stories, because those will need to get very detailed and consider each specific use case very carefully, right? I'm not sure if that's going to be done with the development team or separately before that, but in any case, I don't know if, I don't think that's part of necessarily this project. And another thing is a question: will this token be, in technical terms, backwards compatible? Will it be retroactively tracking the contributions that were already made, that are already recorded in the Sway database?
I think my hunch is to say, no, it has to. I don't know. Somehow.
Well, ideally, in some sort, yes, because this is data what we can use already to experiment around. So we don't have to create a whole new data set in this regard, and can take some stuff of what was there already.
Yeah.
And maybe this initial data, well, also on the whole token thing, I think would make sense as well to define the whole DeepFunding token process in phases. Right now it's really ideation.
Yeah.
Maybe in the proof of concept where we take this first engagements, but be careful of not championing too much, let's say, a seniority, to say, because you have been here already too much in this regard. Let's say that ideally it starts with an equal 0 when the thing is launched for anybody.
Yeah.
Regardless if you engaged already since a year or not, a little bit in this regard.
I don't know if that would be a problem, considering that DeepFund is only at Fund 3. Maybe if it would be Fund 10 or like Catalyst or something, then it could be a seniority, could be seen as already a set in stone seniority, or giving too much advantage to the OGs, as it were. But in this case, given that it's already only 3 funds and the contributions have been on and off for, I don't know.
This
That's
might
true.
be something discussed with the wider community, because there are some
exactly.
people that did put a lot of work into creating this, like the representation. So yeah, it might be something to discuss with the wider community to see what they feel about it, if they think how to comply on it. Needs like wider community.
Definitely one of the important issues to bring up in our community calls.
Yes.
I noted that down, definitely, because this can be actually a really beautiful question to
Yeah.
ramble about. Nice. That's good stuff. And we are 10 minutes over time. Means it's a good call. Because I have another call and I want to stick here.
Yeah, no, this was really great. And Jingle, thank you so much, because that, just visualizing it really helped me understand a lot. So this was really great. Sorry, I'm also very sick again, so my brain's a little it's a little rough.
But that's good.
Yeah, happy to share.
And as a next step, what do you think this, I just took some notes. Do you guys think we could just set up a document, create a summary of today's call, just some key learnings, listing them out a little bit? Also for documentation to say already, okay, when in the community call, they say, no, it should be an NFT. We say, no, we went over this already there. Definitely better reasons to go, not for an NFT in this regard. For example,
Yeah, I'll do that. I was gonna create the drive for us anyway, so I can do that and I'll start the document. I'll put my notes in as well.
Ooh, nice, beautiful. Then that's it for so far. Anybody later who is watching this? Well, we will never really publish this and, oh, look, blah, blah, blah. But whoever stumbles over this and looks it and watches it, sorry, and has some joy in it, ha, beautiful. Have fun. And with this, we stop recording. And